Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biglaw, Money Management for Lawyers, where lawyer turned accredited financial counselor Jessica Medina provides expert tips to help attorneys better manage their money so they can pursue their dream lives.
Hello and welcome. I'm in conversation with Jessica Medina. The topic is personal finances, specifically related to lawyers in big law. Now, Jessica can speak to all sides of this topic. That is because she is a former lawyer turned accredited financial counselor. Nice to see you, Jessica.
Hello, Nancy. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yes. Well, let's start with your legal background. I understand you started in big law.
I did. To be fair, I wanted to be a lawyer back all the way to high school. I had dreams, as I think many people who end up in law school do, of maybe changing the criminal justice system from the inside out. My story veered pretty substantially from there. And when I graduated from law school, I went straight to work at a large firm in DC. Here in the US, we call those very large firms big law. They pay really great salaries, but they have not so great work-life balance. So it wasn't exactly where I had hoped to end up, for my legal career, but it was necessary given my financial circumstances coming out of law school. So I worked at a large law firm in the DC area for 8 years. That was much longer than I had ever anticipated staying there. I then eventually moved over to the Securities and Exchange Commission, also in Washington, D.C. I was in their Division of Enforcement. And while I was there, I worked a lot, obviously, with the securities market and investigating insider trading, Ponzi schemes, and basically the underbelly of the financial markets. And that's where I determined that I needed to get my own personal finances in order if I ever wanted to do anything else besides law.
You were loving what you did. But then what changed? What did you realize?
So I basically fell out of love with the law. When I was in law school, I really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed the rigor. It was such an intellectually challenging area, and I just enjoyed people. And so I thought that I would love being a lawyer. And when I went to work at my firm, I loved my colleagues. Everything was very fascinating, what I worked on. But after a while, the grind was pretty hard. And I realized that being a lawyer, at least the way that I was practicing, had less to do with helping people and more to do with a lot of reading and writing and helping corporations. So it really wasn't providing the fulfillment that I was looking for in my life. And when I switched over to the government, that really would have been my dream job, right? When I went to law school, I thought that I was going to eventually end up in the government, really being a public servant. And so when I arrived there, again, I enjoyed my colleagues, I enjoyed the mission, but it turned out I didn't really love the work. I didn't love spending my days arguing with people who were lying to me. I didn't enjoy the process of discovery, taking testimony, all of these things that I was doing as a practicing attorney that my colleagues absolutely enjoyed. They really just loved bringing in a witness, and grilling them with exhibits. And I loved doing cross-team collaboration. A lot of things that were, really spoke to my love of community, my love of helping people, my love of, really, bringing two sides of the table together. And that just wasn't my bread and butter as a practicing securities attorney. And so I got really disillusioned with the work that I was doing and the amount of hours that I was pouring into a career that didn't feel like it was bringing out the best in me. And so that was when I had an existential crisis, as many lawyers do when they decide they may not want to be a lawyer anymore. It's a huge investment of time and money, which we will talk about, but it's also a huge investment of identity. I think with many of these professions, right, lawyer, doctor, engineer, it becomes a part of who you are. And it can be very difficult to separate yourself from that identity. So I basically tried to figure out, well, what else could I possibly do with my life if I weren't going to practice law? And in deciding that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, I went on my own personal finance journey to make sure that I wouldn't need a lawyer's salary in order to continue living my life the way that I wanted to. And that journey was what led me to becoming an accredited financial counselor. I sit in a very special place of the personal finance world, which I would love to get more into. But it was really my time at the SEC and wanting to leave the law that dropped me into this place of personal finance. And now I help other lawyers with their money too.
What was it that made you want to specifically work with just lawyers?
So I do work with people who are not lawyers, but I have to say 99% of my clients are lawyers. You have to put up with a lot of big law stories when you're working with me. So it's generally works better, when I have a lawyer sitting across the table from me. That being said, I found that as a practicing attorney myself, there was a real lack of support in the personal finance world for lawyers who were just trying to get some of the foundational money management skills under their belt. I didn't grow up in a home where money was talked about in a healthy way. I didn't have any role models of people who were managing their money well, certainly not at the salary that I was bringing in when I was at my DC firm. And so it all felt very foreign to me. And I basically winged it for a long time, which is why it took me so long to be able to leave. But that being said, there are a lot of people in the financial space who would love to work with attorneys, but most of them are interested in growing wealth. They want to take people who already have money and help them grow that money into a larger pot. I wanted to serve people who wanted to figure out how to grow the pot in the first place. And I didn't see a lot of people in my space who understood the life of lawyers, the pressures of lawyers, the stress that lawyers are under, coupled with helping them with some more basic money management skills that they might be a little bit too embarrassed to ask for help on.
We're going to get into that part as well, but give us a snapshot of your clientele. What do they generally have in common? And what do you or did you have in common with them? I mean, we know the legal background, but there's some connection there.
Absolutely. I think Biglaw gets a lot of flack for paying associates so much money. Why can't they figure out, why isn't that enough for them to solve all of their problems? But all of us in the personal finance world know that it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And in Biglaw, it can be very difficult to keep money at the end of the day, given the stress of the job itself. So most of my clients are associates or newer partners in large law firms. They're having trouble managing the money that's coming in. They probably don't have a good sense of where it goes and why they end up, at the end of the month with not so much to show for all of their work and all of their toil. They also may be thinking about a transition. There are a small percentage of people who actually make it to Biglaw partnership. This is by design. This is not a bug in the system, it's a feature. There's no way that you could take the incoming associate classes and have everyone graduate up to partnership. So there is meant to be attrition, and I'm here to help the folks who are going to be part of that attrition. I'm here to help people who are perhaps not interested in becoming a multi-million-dollar Biglaw partner, are perhaps interested in pursuing a different type of career at some point in their legal practice, or perhaps leaving the law entirely. And so many of my clients are looking to make some sort of a job transition that may or may not involve a pay cut, and they would like to get a handle on their money as soon as possible so that they can make that move a little bit more smoother with a little more confidence. And this is me. This is exactly the journey that I was on for so many years when I was working at my firm and then even working in the government. Like I said, I was at my firm for 8 years, and to be fair, I wasn't really good at managing my money the entire time I was there. It wasn't until I went to the government and I was forced to take a pay cut, I really had to figure out how to manage my life. And then when I decided that I didn't want to practice anymore, I really wanted to get a handle on the financial situation so it wouldn't require a lawyer salary for the rest of my career. Those were my motivating factors. And what I see in a lot of my clients is they would also like to be comfortable making some of those moves sooner rather than later. And that's what I'm there to help them with.
That stress and debt, I guess, for a lot of lawyers graduating in the US is something that's real. What is the range you've seen lawyers owing? And what is the best way to approach paying that off?
I'm so glad you asked about student loan debt, Nancy. Oh my goodness, right? This is the elephant in the room for so many attorneys, especially here in the US. Law school is expensive. And this is on top of many attorneys, starting out in potentially a very expensive undergrad education. So most of my clients are battling the same type of student loan debt that I was battling when I graduated from Columbia so many years ago. I took out money to go to my undergrad school in California. I took out all of the money to go to Columbia in New York. And Columbia is not and inexpensive school. It's phenomenal, but it's a top tier school with top tier pricing. And I didn't get a scholarship. I was just happy to get in. So I paid through the nose to go there. We can have a whole separate conversation about, whether I think that was worth it. But I did graduate from law school with over $200,000 of student loan debt. And that's on the low side of what I see these days. I tell you, coming out, many of my clients have minimum six figures, and we're not even talking in the 100s. I have a lot of clients who are up above 200, 250,000 in terms of student loan debt. I also do have some clients who have made inroads in starting to pay down that debt. Most of them are working in large law firms and have the salary that can absorb that kind of a monthly payment. But to be fair, many of my clients are still battling over $150,000 of student loan debt. And part of what I do is help them figure out a repayment strategy that not only works while they're making good money at a law firm, but also works for whatever their next career might be. And I think there is a lot of shame around carrying that kind of student loan debt. There's also a lot of guilt for having taken it out in the first place and feeling like you need to pay it back with lawyer money. That's not the rule. You can pay your loans back with any money. Nobody cares. And there's also forgiveness strategies out there if you have federal loans. So these are the types of things that I try to work with my own clients on to make sure that their student loan debt doesn't become the burden that prevents them from pursuing the career that they really find fulfilling.
Paying it down as quickly as possible is sort of the instinct that we have, but that's not necessarily a good way to do it.
So it really depends. And whenever I'm working with my clients, we always want to figure out what is the best repayment strategy, not only for the short term, but also for the long-term trajectory of their career and their income earning potential. And so I think what a lot of people hear right when they're graduating from law school, well, pay your loans down immediately. You have to get them paid off as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they will haunt you for the rest of your life. And that's simply not true. And to be fair, if all you're doing is focusing on paying off your student loans after you graduate from law school, those are additional years of financial growth that you're missing out on. You're already 3 years behind everybody else at a minimum, right? You're starting your career late. You've been in school for a while and you probably haven't been earning very much or saving for the future. And so if you then pivot to only concentrating on your student loan debt, those are additional years of growth that you might be missing out on. So I always caution my clients to make sure that they're not just making an emotional decision about whether to focus on paying off their student loan debt immediately, but really counting on all of the other financial goals that they may have over the long-term trajectory of their career and taking those into account so that they can come up with the best repayment strategy for them. In terms of the actual strategies, I teach that there are 3 ways that you can approach these suckers. You can repay them as quickly as possible, which is a strategy for some people, depending on what kind of job you get into, what your financial obligations look like, how many years you have ahead of you of high earning potential. Also, what interest rates might be looking like and that, generally economically. So that is an option. It's just usually not the best option for most people, even though it's the one that gets all of the press in the personal finance world. The second option is to go for forgiveness. If you have federal student loans here in the United States, there are wonderful forgiveness programs that you can take advantage of that really are meant to allow you to live your life and pay off your student loan debt. And anything that's left over after a 20 or 25 year period, that gets forgiven. Why? Because you've been paying these things for 20 or 25 years and you've been contributing to society during that time. So you get a little bonus at the end. The last strategy isn't so much a strategy as a way to approach this thorny issue of your student loan debt. I call it the repay your way strategy. It really is going to take all of the different factors of what your income is now, what you expect it to be in the future, what your other financial obligations are. If you have kids in daycare and you're living in a major metropolitan area, you may not be able to handle a very aggressive student loan payment, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you won't put your foot on the gas later when more resources free up, and then you are able to focus more on that student loan debt. But it's thinking through, are you going to have opportunities in the future where you can maybe make a big bonus, like a big bolus payment toward that debt? Or do you have another investment that might be growing that you could use to offset, your student loans in the future? So it's a very holistic approach, and there's no one way to do it. And it really does take into account all the different debt that you have, everything else you have going into your life, and making sure that we're picking a strategy that works for you now and in the future.
It's so clear that practicing law comes with so many pressures and demands. And I mean, even thinking about your financial future, especially if your passion for it changes, that can be overwhelming. And how do you help people through that? And why do you think it's so hard for lawyers to ask for help?
Oh gosh, another whole podcast episode on why attorneys are terrible at asking for help. Part of it, I think it comes down to number one, we've been trained to only ask questions we know the answer to, right? That is literally deposition training number one. You don't put anything out into the universe unless you know exactly what you're going to get back. That's how you don't get into trouble. That's how you make sure you're controlling the record at all times, right? So we have some of that ingrained. And sadly, we take a lot of our attorney skills and use them in other parts of our life where they are not super helpful. And so, right, a lot of people will be afraid to ask those questions because they don't know the answer already and they're afraid of looking silly. Right. And that kind of leads into the second paradigm for attorneys. We are generally experts in every room, right? We're paid to be experts. We're paid to have the answers. Even when we're working with experts, we're supposed to know the subject matter as well as the expert so we can question them appropriately, right? So we really sit in that expert energy for much of our professional life. And it's hard to step out of that when you're dealing with something like money. It's also very hard to step out of that energy when you feel like the person that you're talking to may question your judgment on some things that you've done with respect to money. Maybe you didn't make the best choice when it came to, you're taking out additional student loans. Maybe, you didn't pick the right job, or maybe you haven't invested in your 401k since day one, or you haven't started a 529 for your kids. There are a lot of things that attorneys can be very sensitive about if they feel like they're going to be judged, right? We are judged all day long, literally by judges, right?
Literally.
We deal with people judging us and our actions and our words and our strategies all the time. And I think that we are a little bit overly sensitive to other people's judgment when it comes to our personal life. We deal with it enough on the professional side. We don't want somebody coming in and, looking under the hood and telling us that we've been messing something up along the way. And so part of what's so important for me in my practice is making sure that my clients know there are no stupid questions. I was not good at this when I was practicing either. It's perfectly reasonable that they have no idea what they're doing because they probably were never taught this at any point in their life. And they don't teach it in law school. They barely teach it in high school, and many families don't teach it at home. So if there's something that you don't know, there's a good reason you don't know it. Let's just fix that for you moving forward instead of beating ourselves up that we didn't know it earlier. And I think a lot of my clients really appreciate and respond to that level of empathy that I can bring to their situation. I don't expect them to know everything. I don't expect them to have done better. I don't expect them to have more money than they do. I take them exactly as they are, and we move forward productively with new information, with good information, and hopefully being able to make intentional choices moving forward.
Intentional choices and no judgment.
And no judgment. This is a judgment-free zone. We deal with enough judgment already.
Can you share with us a story about a client that you've helped?
Oh, absolutely. I have two, because some of the work that I do, we end up with very different results, but the process is the same, which I think is always so fascinating for me to watch. I had a client who was actually not even working at a firm. She had transitioned already. She was in-house and she enjoyed the work, but she knew that she wanted something more from her own career. She had dabbled in a little bit of career coaching, and she was very interested in diversity efforts. And so she really wanted to grow that part of her life. She was also very interested in potentially relocating to Spain at some point in the future, which has a soft spot in my heart. I studied abroad in Spain when I was in college, and if anybody wants to move there, I'm happy to try to help you plan it.
Nice.
But so when we first met, her finances were pretty messy, and she knew that, and she knew she wanted to get a better handle on things, especially to be able to make this big jump from a prestigious in-house counsel position to basically going out on her own. She also wanted to get another house in the process. She was getting married. There were all kinds of big transitions on the horizon for her. And so part of what we did was, first off, just get a handle on her actual financial position. She had been so terrified to look at her numbers, she didn't even know whether she was doing well or needed to really make some changes. Whenever you have a big transition like that coming up, you probably want to prepare differently than you have been up to that point. But I was so happy to be able to tell her and validate the work that she had already done. And you could see the relief on her face to just know that, oh, have I been making good decisions? Wow. I didn't even realize I've been beating myself up thinking that I've been messing it all up. But now that we put everything together, it looks like I'm actually doing okay. Absolutely, you're doing okay. But we have to do some things differently if you want to make all these changes.
Right.
Right? And that's when the strategy and the planning come in, and that's what we worked on. So we worked on looking at all of her financials, what would be required for her to make some of these big career jumps, also make some of these big lifestyle jumps. And over the course of us working together, she did get into a new house that was right in the budget that we talked about. So I was very proud that we had done that work together. And now she's on her way to starting a new career. And so I think this can be really, it can be very inspiring for people who think that there's just no way out of the career path that they've chosen, that they're stuck where they are. There are moves that you can make, there are strategies that you can deploy, and there's just an air of possibility that you can now apply to your financial life to make all of those things happen. So that's one of my favorite client stories, is just being able to completely overhaul someone's, not only their financial position, but also the experience that they have with their money, right? To feel very good about the decisions that they make with their money, to feel confident that they make good financial decisions. That was very important work that I was doing.
I know you have a second example, but we're going to save that for another episode. So with that in mind, give us the best way for people to connect with you.
The best way to find me is on my website at www.jessicamedinallc.com. You can find lots of resources. There are blog posts. There's ways to get in touch with me. But also, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm pretty prolific over there. So come find me on LinkedIn. I post all the time. And I also have a newsletter that gives money tips every other week. And so that's a really great resource to get some guidance on personal finance for lawyers and find some community of people who might be struggling with the same things that you are.
Jessica, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Nancy.
Jessica Medina is an accredited financial counselor helping lawyers finance their dream lives. Remember to like and subscribe.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos like this one.